So what's your least favourite station on the Underground then?
Waterloo.
It's because of those travellators, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're 1.5 people wide, and so you can't ever get past people, but also people always want to get past you, and it never quite works. They could make them slightly wider, but they can't, of course, because it's a very modern technology in a very old system, which is kind of the Underground as a whole. You might have questioned how you can have beautiful stations like this, and then dilapidated central tourist stations like this, all on the same network, but the London Underground is a series of contradictions, like the Central Line, which has this fun loop in the track, but then your circle, if you will, but then the Circle Line doesn't loop. It is deliberately not a circle. What is the deal with London? I think the simplest answer could be, well, 200 years of history. It's the oldest metro system in the world, but I think it's actually much more interesting than that, and I love fun facts. So let's explain why the Underground is like that, how it's like that, and more interestingly, some of the weird quirks that creates. Because, for example, you might think of the London Underground as being underground. I mean, look, I've got to take escalators all the way down if I want to do it, but it's actually not true.
That is because 55% of the track of the London Underground is actually above the surface, even running through fields at some point on the Metropolitan line, and so you might think that really it should be called the London Overground, but that's a separate TfL service, which, fun fact, at some point runs below ground. Honestly, the London Underground branding can be a bit confusing.
In fact, there are 11 lines on the Underground, but only 2 of them are fully underground. The Victoria line, of course, and the Waterloo and City line, which is barely a line to begin with. So we're talking about like 2/11ths, but not even that, of the Underground being truly underground. Every other line has a station which is subsurface on some level. By the way, Waterloo and City line, one of the quirkiest underground lines anywhere in the world. Seriously, look at these tube map diagrams. Waterloo, City, or Bank, which is the main city station. Very, very fun. But anyway, getting out the loud stations.
Something else that is interesting about the Underground, given just how many lines there are and how diverse they are, is that every single one of these lines has at least 2 stations in Zone 1. This is because fundamentally the Underground is designed to get people from the outer zones into the inner ones, and there was only one exception to this previously, the East London line, but the East London line has long since stopped existing and been absorbed into the Overground, although you can still find it at some stations.
Look, it's still got the old logo for the East London line, and also the old Docklands Light Railway sign. Also London Cable Car instead of Emirates Airline. Apparently Bermondsey is a blast to the past. True for the area as well as the station, by the way. Oh, another interesting fact actually is that despite having 10.5 underground lines, the London Underground does not equally serve all of London. Everyone knows there is a centre bias, but this does mean that out of the 32 London boroughs, 5 of them don't have any, but they still have to pay taxes into the TfL budget. It's one of the weird, controversial political things, and also one of the reasons why it's always getting expanded further out. Anyway, with that said, let's go not to the Waterloo and City, but instead towards the Jubilee line. So the other geographic inequality that London has is between north and south. It is very widely known that if you're in South London, you're not catching the tube, you have to catch a bus or a regular train, or heaven forbid, a tram. And the reason for that is because there are very few tube lines south of the river. In fact, the Jubilee line, a line which effectively is trying to go south of the river, makes so many river crossings, the most of any line, that it ends up being south of the river, or north of the river, then south here at Waterloo, then north again at Canary Wharf, then south again at North Greenwich, and then north again at Canning Town, leading to so many tunnels and a very weird north-south, north-south, north-south London thing, which might be interesting to you. Anyway, speaking of interesting, the Jubilee line is one of the newest lines on the network. It might seem, obviously everyone knows about the Elizabeth line, it's fancy, it's new looking, but it's not actually part of the tube, so no fun facts about it today. But even though the Jubilee line feels like it's the newest line, because you get signal, heaven forbid, are we going this way? I think I'm going this way, by the way. Oh god, the train's there. But although you get signal on this line, and it's got platform screen doors, which makes it seem very interesting to many, it's also, interestingly, not the newest tube line. While on the way to the oldest tube line, I'm at Baker Street, which is famous for having Sherlock Holmes living on it. But fun fact, Sherlock Holmes lived so close to a tube station and never used it once. And so, honestly, that is a sign that he's not a true Londoner. But you would be a true Londoner if you did know the newest underground line is technically the Hammersmith and City one. Honestly, most people taking the Hammersmith City line are probably just taking it for the exact same route that it covers with the Circle line. However, it does have a slightly different course where it kind of becomes the District line for a bit, and even though it has precisely no new track on it, it is technically the newest line, but Is it in reality something for you to decide?
Because ultimately, despite the Jubilee line opening in 1979 and the Hammersmith and City opening in 1990, there was no new stations or really any new track used for it, and so in a way it is the Jubilee that feels newer because of its expansion, which happened in the millennium, and so that is the interesting argument about where the newest line comes from. Is it the actual newest, or is it the one that had the most recent extension? Because if you were to use that latter logic, then you'd actually have to say that the Northern line is the newest, because the two newest stations on the network are on this branch of the Northern Line at Nine Elms, which in London Underground nomenclature would make this Nine Elms Station, and so the next station along the line, Battersea Power Station, is officially Battersea Power Station Station, and is therefore the newest tube station, and makes the Northern Line the newest, but in a way that I don't think anyone would agree with. However, the Northern Line is also weird for effectively being two lines at the same time. As you can see, they have entirely separate paths, only sharing a station at Camden. This is the place where they can't be properly disconnected because they share 3 platforms for 4 sets of trains, north and south for both of these. Also, fun fact, the Northern Line doesn't just go north, you can take it south. Wow, what a horrifically misleading name. In fact, take a look at the Circle Line and you'll realize that that's not even a circle, it's more of a spiral. If you took it from its terminus at Edgware Road, then you would expect to be able to ride round in a circle and get back to Edgware Road, but you sort of can, it's just on the other side of the station, and the actual other terminus is Hammersmith, which makes it much more of a spiral, and so this is a very misleading name.
This map is a lie, the name of the line is a lie, and they should just rename it the Yellow Line if they're going to lie about the very dimensions, or the Spiral Line. I'd be accepting of either. Anyway, let's catch the Hammersmith and City. Not westbound, but instead eastbound. Because the Hammersmith and City, the Circle, as well as the District and the Metropolitan Line are all known as subsurface lines. These were the original London Underground lines, and so they have these lovely Love the Tube signs up. 160 years of service. It feels like more than that, but these are the original tube lines, but they're also barely underground lines by today's definition. In the time since this was basically built to be as bare minimum underground as possible. They dug a hole in the ground, then covered it up later. The newer tube lines are all dug deep underground using tunnel boring machines, and that's what most people consider to be an underground line in modern day parlance. This is just an underground train line, which is one of the big reasons for so many of the differences. These train lines are all walk-through, fun fact, but also it's air conditioned. Those people are not roasting to death. Those people are having very much a train style experience that just happens to be under London. In fact, it's even reflected in the destinations they go through. You can go to exotic places like Watford or Chesham or Amersham. You ever heard of any of those places? You haven't, because they're not in London. Unless you watch my buffet video, obviously. Seriously, look how wide this train is. I can be all the way over here and then also all the way over here. Nowadays, when you have wide trains like this with exotic destinations like Luton or Gatwick Airport, you call it a train service. You call it Thameslink or something like that. But in the day, underground trains were a new thing, which is why there's some weird underground rails which are part of the underground network, but also feel entirely different. The Northern Line lies to you too. You can't just take it north, you can take it south as well. Wow, what a misleading name. I'm gonna do that right now though. So I want to show off those escalators that you saw at the beginning of the video. Is this too much behind the scenes? Should I be pretending that I'm actually in King's Cross St Pancras, which by the way has the most underground lines. That is 6 of them that run through here, by the way, on top of the National Rail services that come here. And interestingly, that makes it the underground station with the most underground lines, but also the underground station with the most tap in and outs. I believe it's 69.9 million people who came through here in 2022, which is more than the population of the UK, which is kind of wild to say. I mean, in reality, it's just a lot of people commute every day, but you know, ignore that. It's a very crazy number, right? I also think it's really interesting to talk about when we're talking about how many lines there are in King's Cross, St Pancras, that the most forms of transport in TfL that you'll find is in Stratford. There's a map over here to show you this actually. So in King's Cross you get the most underground lines, but if you want the most forms of transport, going to Stratford is where you'll find it, because as well as having the underground, I believe there's a couple of lines, the Central and the Jubilee, they also have the DLR, they also have the Overground, and they also have the Elizabeth line. That is the only place in London where you can find Elizabeth line, Underground, Overground, and DLR. Fun fact, you get the trifecta of or the quadrifecta. Is there such thing as quadrifecta? You get the quadrifecta, all of the 4 underground forms of transport. Although I guess you don't get the tram, which is all the way down in Zone 5, but no one cares about the tram. Sorry, tram. Anyway, let's go get on a train to Cockfosters. So right now, I'm at Covent Garden, a station you probably shouldn't ever use, and I've just started a rail journey and a timer for the next station. Because fun fact, this and Leicester Square are actually the two closest stations anywhere on the Underground network. This is especially fun because it means that because you pay a Zone 1 fare to go from one to the other, £2.20 at time of recording I think, that means that it is the most expensive journey per mile anywhere in Europe because, you know, paying £2.20 and travelling a few hundred metres, actually not very good value. In fact, the fun thing about this journey is it's so short that by the time you go down the station and up again, it is never worth actually doing by tube. However, despite that, TfL has a website where you can see how many people use a given route at a given point in time, and there are hundreds of people a day who do this very pointless, most expensive journey, which is now over. The doors are open. In fact, these stations are so close together that even if you're coming to Covent Garden, I think it makes sense just to go to Leicester Square anyway, because they are so close together. It's an interesting journey, and way more importantly, unlike Covent Garden, Leicester Square actually has escalators. At Covent Garden, it's lift only. It's terrible. You have to do one of the longest spiral staircases, equivalent to a 15-story building, I hear. No one wants to do that, and so what do you do instead? Well, logically, you get out of Leicester Square. I'm here for I think a Canadian-themed bar in central London. Got to celebrate Canada Day. There's a lot of people looking back. Apparently you're not meant to record yourself talking about Canadian bars on the tube. Anyway.
This fact about not taking the tube one stop in central London is the #1 fact that I try to give to tourists because it's the one that will save them the most money, but I think one of the most important ones to understand, kind of relating to the history of the Underground, is the fact that it is a very old network, and as a result there's this weird kind of difference between the station you start a journey at and the station you end a journey at. It is very likely that you can start at a station that was made in the 1800s, but end in a station that was made somewhere in the late 90s or 2000s, and it means that there is this hugely different tube experience based on where you actually go. And speaking of hugely different tube experience, I think it should also be referenced that that refers to the Overground. Whether the Overground is the tube or not is probably something you can debate. However, right now the Overground just kind of exists like it's a line on the Underground. It's all orange, despite being made up of 6 very different lines, literally made up with different power networks and different trains in many cases, and sharing very few destinations or interchanges. And that is why there was an expensive program that was put in place to give them all independent identities and names, and that has in fact been confirmed to be going forwards with these 6 names. And let's be honest, there's a lot more misses in these names than there are hits, but it is worth saying that regardless of what you think about all of the names, and let's be honest, I've heard very few defenses of them, they will be colouring the Overground lines on the map, which is something which is great for readability. It kind of reminds me of the Tokyo subway, which is different to the Tokyo metro, which is different to the trains that just happen to run in Tokyo. There are 3 different maps that you need to know because they're operated by 3 different groups of people, so it's handy that in London at the very least they've been operated by the same people and they take the same fares, but soon it will be that they'll all have their own lines and you don't even need to know about the various different groups like, oh, what's going on with the Overground and what's going on with the DLR, although that still doesn't have coloured lines yet. Maybe one day, maybe one day. Speaking of things that are one day, I hope you've enjoyed this video, but one day maybe you'll see more of them if you consider subscribing to the channel. For now though, I hope you've enjoyed the tube fun facts and I look forward to seeing you for some other ones because I love the tube. It's that I think that public transport's very effective at getting people places, just like how YouTube is effective for getting videos to your subscription box if you hit the subscribe button. Yeah, nailed it. Goodbye.